All right, so we'll go ahead and get started so we can leave plenty of time for our Q&A discussion part today. So welcome to this event. My name is Elizabeth King. I'm the director of the Center for Russian East European and Asian Studies and also an associate professor in the School of Public Health. I'm very excited that you're all able to join us for today's Kreis Noon lecture. I also want to take a moment to thank our co-sponsors, the Slavic Languages and Literatures and Comparative Literature. And thank you, Dr. Krushko, for your connection with our guest for today, Victor Martinovich, and facilitating our opportunity to have him with us today to give this lecture on permanent reinventing of itself, Belarusian culture, confronting cyclical erasure. I also want to take this, before I introduce Victor, I want to also take opportunity to kind of, alert you to some of our upcoming events. We are co-sponsoring a lecture at the Center for Armenian Studies that takes place Wednesday, October 2nd from 4 to 5:30, right here in this room. For us, deserts or bustling cities, early Soviet Yerevan between Armenian futurism and post-Persian retropia. And then also, we won't have our own Kreis Noon lecture in October, but we're getting ready for Monday, November 4th at 5:30 for the Kreis annual Borka Tamninovich lecture, Migration and Narration, where we'll be joined by writer Alexander Hemen that evening up on the 10th floor of Weiser Hall. So I encourage you all to come out for that event. A nice activity pre-U.S. election the next day, but hopefully you'll have a good turnout for that event as well. And our next Kreis Noon lecture will be on Wednesday, November 20th, Political Anxieties in the Caucasus, the Georgian National Narrative Between War and Peace, where we'll be joined by a professor of anthropology from Free University of Tbilisi, Nutsa Batishvili. But today, we have Victor Martinovich, who's a Belarusian writer, playwright, art historian, and public intellectual. He is the author of 6 fiction novels and 7 plays, most notably the novels Paranoia, Night, and Revolution. His work combines elements of social fiction with parabolic and realistic depictions of post-Soviet societies. Plays based on his work have been staged in Hamburg, Munich, Vienna, Minsk, Innsbruck, and St. Petersburg. Victor Martinovich is an associate professor at the European Humanities University in Vilnius, Lithuania, where he teaches courses in the arts and humanities. His PhD dissertation focused on Belarusian-born painters at the School of Paris and Vitebsk Avant-Garde. He is currently on a Fulbright fellowship at Hunter College in New York, where he's working on his monograph on the arts as a language of the humanities. So I'd like to turn it over. Please join me in welcoming Victor Martinovich.
Okay, I'm much better in talking than I'm in reading, but even texts come by me. But they say that when you go to the university, you have to prepare a lecture. So I prepared something very short, like 20 minutes, on a topic which was announced for today's meeting. You will now suffer from my reading capacities and abilities, and if after this suffering you would still want me to read something, I would probably present you a short extract from the book that I'm composing here. But first I have to present you what I've written past 3 days for the event that we have today. So, permanent reinvention of itself, Belarusian culture confronting cyclical erasure. The official reason why in September 1919 Mark Chagall was ordered to vacate his 3-room apartment, which he had set up in the building of the People's Art School was to make space for the Museum of Contemporary Arts. However,
Sorry, I think the microphone's not on, not everyone can hear.
okay.
So it'd be a shame to do the whole thing
Yeah,
and then not have
sure.
half the people here. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay. However, it's hard to believe that the revolutionary authorities of Vitebsk were genuinely interested in establishing a museum of proletarian paintings, of which they were barely aware. More likely, they simply disliked Chagall and wanted to put him in his place. 5 years before these events, Chagall had returned from Paris, where he had been a student living in a chaotic artist's residence known as La Ruche, or the Hive. In Paris, Chagall was supported by a stipend from the influential St. Petersburg lawyer Maxime Wienerberg. Unlike his fellow artist Soutine, Chagall had enough money not only to visit Henri Matisse's exhibitions and fall under his influence, but also to afford some modest meals. While in case with Soutine, we know that the meals that he has been taking were preferably the wines, different wines proposed by Modigliani. In 1914, Chagall returned to Vitebsk to marry Bella Rosenfeld, the well-educated daughter of a wealthy family of jewelers. Chagall found himself stalled in Vitebsk as 1914 was not an ideal time for traveling across Europe due to the outbreak of World War I. Chagall had little support in Vitebsk, and when the Bolshevik Revolution took place, with Vitebsk still part of the Russian Empire, he found himself quite isolated in his hometown. Nonetheless, Anatoly Lunacharsky, who had met Chagall in Paris a decade ago and written the first review on his works, was an admirer of his art. Lunacharsky, the Red Commissar of Education and Culture, promoted Chagall to the position of Vitebsk's Commissioner of Fine Arts, allowing him to organize art schools and prepare communist festivals and performances. Chagall tried to remain accountable to Lunacharsky in Moscow, but the local Red authorities in Vitebsk wanted him to be accountable to them. This tension culminated in the official order to Chagall, his wife, and their newborn daughter to vacate the rooms they occupied in People's Art School, which he created in 24 hours. Ironically, it was the rising Moscow star Kazimir Malevich who took over the rooms left by the dissident commissioner and rector Marc Chagall, and not the promised museum. It took another 3 years and the departure of both Chagall and Malevich from Vitebsk to finally make room for the museum. What followed was rather tragic. Chagall left behind a collection of his own works, as well as paintings by Vasily Kandinsky, Vera Yermolaeva, and Kazimir Malevich. You can understand the approximate cost of this collection. In October 1929, an inspection of what remained of the Museum of Modern Arts in the People Art School in Vitebsk revealed that all the paintings by Chagall, Kandinsky, Yermolaeva, and Malevich had been lost. And you can think that they have been stolen, but not. After that, no oil painting by Marc Chagall were ever stationed in Vitebsk. For the rest of 20th century, no Chagall's oil picture crossed the border of Belarus for any type of exhibition. In 2013, Belgazpромbank acquired a set of Chagall's painting, including Le Somnambule, Pendule Ciel Embrassé, and Paysage Vert, paying more than $1 million for pieces of the same authorship that had once been in Vitebsk but had tracelessly vanished. The city of Vitebsk still has no works by Malevich, and local museums display no original paintings by Chagall, only a few lithographs. Oil paintings, only a few lithographs gifted to them by European collectors. According to memoirs
from Chagall's students, particularly an interview recorded in 1974 with Valentin Antoshenko-Olenev, the students, lacking canvases for their studies, would tear apart Chagall's own canvases to reuse them in 1920s. The Erasure of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Vitebsk, which with its collection assembled by Marc Chagall himself, was the result of a shift in Bolsheviks' cultural policy. Lenin had been relatively inclusive and eclectic in his cultural approach. He allowed avant-garde movements like Futurism, Imaginism. He endured the works of Mayakovsky, and he even left alive the author of outstanding novel The Cynics by Anatoly Mariengov. However, 5 years after Lenin's death, Stalin announced a major shift in cultural policy. Artists who had once been celebrated as heroes of anti-bourgeois leftist art were now condemned as formalists who are disconnected from the working people. This shift culminated in events like the cancellation of Hutimas or arrest of Kazimir Malevich by OGPU in 1930. While researching the fate of 1920s Museum of Fine Arts for my book Rodina, Marc Chagall in Vitebsk, published by New Literary Review in Moscow, praise to Elena Gapova who helped me with this, I was puzzled by how a place so rich in artifacts and the legacies of such towering figures as Chagall, Lisitsky and Malevich could end up with none of their works. What kind of great flood could have wiped everything away? 5 years later, I found myself in the middle of this great flood. Watching everything I and my colleagues, writers, artists, theater directors, musicians, had created sweeping away by its tide. A number of reasons can be cited to explain this continuous self-erasure. First of all, there is the fact that Belarus lies on the border between two civilizations, the West and the East. On one side, we have individualist Europe with respect to human rights and private property. On the other, the collectivist East, where leaders are revered as they were appointed by the heavens. This dividing line runs right through the middle of Belarus. In my mother's family, from Grodno district, people dined with forks and knives, while in my father's village, only 300 kilometers on the east, they used only spoons, cutlery that could be easily carved from the wood. My mother was Catholic, my father Orthodox, and if you think the differences between these two traditions are insignificant, consider the concept of Orthodox penance. In Orthodoxy, one can engage in various sins and still maintain a semblance of holiness by performing weekly penance in church. This is the true source of the moral ambivalence for all Dostoevsky's characters, where good and evil coexist equally. There is no single good character in Dostoevsky. If you take anybody from for example, the Duke Myshkin from Idiot, they always combine good and bad qualities, and it's kind of new normality that Dostoevsky irradiated. Fyodor Mikhailovich, such a central, this element makes Fyodor Mikhailovich such a central figure in our current deep inquiry into the origins of what is happening in the region today. The division between East and West is also evident in how each side historically recorded its thoughts. To the west of Minsk, Roman script prevails, while to the east the Slavic alphabet of Kirill and Methodius is used. Now imagine the internal conflict that arises when you live at the crossroads of these two big worlds. Francisc Scarina, born in Polotsk, Belarus, in the 16th century, was one of the first to feel the consequences of this tension. In 1517, in Prague, he published a psalter translated into a language he called Rusin. Later in Vilnius, Lithuania, He published 23 books of the Bible, becoming a pioneer of printing in Eastern Europe. The impact of this cultural achievement on a region from between East and West was immediate. For those living in the world of the Roman alphabet, Scarina's books were considered heretical because his translation from ancient Greek, I doubt he ever translated from Aramean or ancient Hebrew. So I think he used ancient Greek as a source, but nobody could be confident in this because we know so little about him. Actually, that's it's more or less our speculation. So for Romans, his translation from ancient Greek was done without following proper allowances and blessings from religion hierarchs. Some of his book covers, and this is what we know for sure, were later found in Polish Wrocław, repurposed to bind over texts deemed more acceptable. So they took the covers from his incunabulas and kind of reused them for Polish writings, Polish printings. Meanwhile, for those east of Polsk, Scarina's Bible was seen as sinful because it was printed in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania under the patronage of a Polish-Lithuanian king, who was viewed by the Russian Tsar as an illegitimate ruler of lands that belonged to the Russian Empire. So his book presumably were burnt in Moscow, since the evidences of this is quite questionable. If you want to see how even ancient history can become a battleground for civilizational disputes, just compare the entries on Francisc Scarina and his Bible in the Polish, Russian and Belarusian Wikipedia pages. For a real mind blow, compare the differences between the Scarina's entries in the official Belarusian Wikipedia and the version written in Tarashkevitsa, the banned Belarusian orthography. And yes, in Belarus we have such a thing as banned Belarusian spelling, and I remember newspapers receiving official warnings for using the wrong spelling of certain words, like sneg with an extra soft sign. There was a notable attempt to bridge the differences between East and West by introducing a new form of Christianity that blended Orthodox rituals, Russian liturgy, and Roman accountability with bishops appointed by the Holy See. This new branch, called Uniatism, meaning unity, was established with the signing of the Union of Brest in 1596. Predictably, it led to even more conflict and bloodshed, including the assassination of Uniate Bishop Josaphat Kuncevich by Orthodox Christians in 1623, and the infamous Polsk massacre in 1705, where Russian Tsar Peter the Great himself killed 4 Uniate monks for they were defending Kuncevich's remains in the Cathedral of Saint Sophia in Polsk. Belarus is a culture whose entire history can be viewed through waves of erasure caused by its position atop of geopolitical volcano. One of the most famous musical compositions by a person of Belarusian origin, the Polonaise in A minor, was composed as Michał Kleofas Ogiński packed up to flee the country following his involvement in the 1794 uprising. Ogiński had commanded a regiment of hunters during the uprising and had to quickly escape. The melody became an anthem for those dispossessed due to the political engagement and forced into exile. Its unofficial title is Farewell to the Homeland. Napoleon Orda, an icon for Belarusian art of 19th century, I can show you one of his, couple of his paintings. This, for example, was a participant, and he was a director of Paris Opera from 1847. Napoleon Orda was a participant of Tadeusz Kościuszko's 1831 rebellion. He earned the rank of captain and the order of Virtuti Militari. virtues of military in Latin, whatever virtues of military can be imagined. Before the rebellion, Orda had noble status, land and an estate in the village of Aracevici. After the uprising, all his property was confiscated, and he fled to Paris under a false name. Partial amnesty declared by Alexander I in 1856 allowed Orda to return to his homeland, but it didn't restore him in his property rights. So he spent half of his life documenting the beauty of parks and palazzos of the region, many of which had also been confiscated from their previous owners for political involvement. In the early 21st century, when the modern Belarusian state began restoring some of the buildings, Orda, the building that Orda had sketched, they wanted to convert them to museums, so that's why they restored them. So the government and architects hired by government, they relieved on his drawings, of the drawings of a rebellion of a rebel guy who was deprived of all his properties. Kind of historical anecdote. One of my favorite pre-Soviet artists, active in what is now Belarus, Stanislav Zhukovsky, specialized in painting interiors of noble estates. This is one of his really iconical pictures. With rare exceptions, Zhukovsky never depicted people in these sunlit rooms, which gave his paintings a slightly eerie yet delicate quality. I was always intrigued by his fascination with the Atlantis of fading aristocratic beauty, a world just a minute away from sinking forever. One of his late interiors, this is one. One of his late interiors, with the same idyllic inner light and the blue twilight visible through the windows, has unpredictable and disturbing red masks next to the Christmas tree. These masks replace the traditional traces of human presence in Zhukovsky's interiors, such as a graceful woman's head. You understand the reason for these masks when you take a look at the date. It's 1918, so the Christmas depicted was spent in a country going through the Bolshevik Revolution, with mansions burning and their owners either evacuating or getting themselves ready, captured as a class aliens for new rulers. I didn't fully understand the mood of Zhukovsky's interiors from the 1910s until I looked closer to into his biography. I discovered that his father, Julian, had been stripped of his property and noble rights for participating in the 1863 uprising. Artist's sentimental attachment to these delicate chairs and chestnut tables reflected a nostalgia for the world he had been exiled from, a world that was now vanishing. You can see the pattern: 1794, 1831, 1863, rebellions occurred on the territory of modern-day Belarus roughly every 30 years. After 1917, these waves of uprisings stopped, largely because Belarus became part of the emerging Soviet Union, with only one civilizational influence shaping it. However, after the collapse of the USSR in 1991, we gained independence without any fight on our side. Independence that is given and not taken is always fragile. Just 5 years ago, Belarus held the world record for the highest number of Schengen visas per capita. Lonely Planet, famous guidebook, described it as a socialism with cappuccino. We had several independent publishing houses, a well-established book distribution system, private media that reached at least 20% of the population daily, and a vibrant theater and art scene. All that was wiped, everything was wiped out after the events that began in the summer of 2020. Both independent publishers I worked with have been shut down. One spent 5 days in prison. My place had been removed from the theaters, and all the directors, the theater directors who used to stage my works, have immigrated. While we can discuss the details of what happened between 2020 and the present, I want to emphasize that these events were merely the latest in a long history of tragedies caused by our position at the crossroads of civilizations. For anyone who believes in the bright future of Belarus literature, theater and art in exile as little as I do, the situation is similar to that moment in Alice in Wonderland, where the girl has to run with all her might just to stay in the same place. Right now I see how even the mere mention of our culture, or the fact that we were ever part of this culture, is disappearing. This is because it costs money to maintain the computer servers of news media that have been documented everything happening in our country over the past 20 years, and then received a title of an extremist formation and lost both readers and right to work. So they have to pay these servers, and they don't have sources, the income to pay them. So what is happening is just the erasure of last 30 years of our existence, and this is unstoppable. It will happen to the end, upcoming months, and I will become just some strange guy with the Wikipedia entry with no working links in it. So what can be done to it? Have you ever wondered why, after the collapse of USSR in 1991, something entirely different emerged from the ruins of USSR? Why wasn't it just another reincarnation of the Soviet mentality under Yeltsin's rule? One answer can be found here in Ann Arbor. You've undoubtedly heard of Ardis Publishing, and the many authors, some outstanding, others more debatable, who found a home for their texts there in Ardis when they couldn't be published anywhere else. So when the Soviet Empire collapsed, its citizens had ready examples of good literature. I mean really good. Remember the Master and Margarita, Remezov, Mandelstam and Platonov. And good literature is also a ground for humanistic ideas, for some alternatives. And this literature was waiting for them in newly minted Russian translations from English, in English they were preserved. If you ask me where the solution to the current deadlock in our region lies, I would tell you it lies in poetry, in great theater plays, in films and TV series that are talented enough to outlive the next 2 or 3 years. If we don't create these works, we won't survive the ongoing clash between two civilizational foundations. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now the promised choice. I really much better in talking than I'm in reading. And we can just talk a little bit. We can just exchange our views. You can ask questions. I can ask questions. We can just discuss orally. Or I can tell you a little bit about the monograph or book or non-fiction book that I composed here, and present you one not very short, like 10 minutes of reading, fragment from this book, presenting a good illustration of what was happening in Belarus between 2020 and current moment. What would you vote for? What would be
I think
more
we have time for both. If you
for both.
have
Okay.
energy for both. Like,
Okay.
I don't know how much you were going to tell. I guess.
Okay.
But if people have burning questions, they could ask them.
Yeah,
You can do
if-
it whichever order you want. But on our end, we have time for you.
I can
Yeah.
can really hardly imagine a burning questions about such a boring topic as Belarusian culture and everything. But if you have, just put them. I will burn it even more. No. Oh yes.
Do you really believe that it's such a boring topic?
Yes, I mean, yeah. I'm near. I evidence so little attention to this topic all around the world, and I evidence so little quantity of people who can even point Belarus on map. But I should be realistic. Of course, it's not boring for me. I mean, of course, it's the essence of life for me, and of course, it's kind of the existence on the edge for me. But not for you. I mean, you probably last time heard about Belarus 4 years ago when it was broadly on news medias. But the nature of news media is that they never follow up. And I come to Germany, for example, in October of last year on the premiere of my text, and there are some people and even journalists, they start asking questions like, now when everything is all right in Belarus, what can you say about come on, we have like 30 arrests every day. I mean, we have 10 to 30 official reports of somebody being punished for 2020 every day. And now when everything is settled, I can say that it has no hope or anything. So yeah, I guess that this topic is pretty boring. Yes?
You've talked about like this like secular cultural or cyclical cultural erasure, and I wonder like what you make of sort of like the closeness between Lukashenko and Putin and the talks of like the development of some kind of union state over the last few decades.
Mm-hmm.
Like how does that fit into your, I mean I feel like it fits into that framework pretty well, but I'm just wondering what your stance on that sort of thing is.
Yeah, I think that he used the energy of bright people who were creating new literature, post-Soviet literature, past 20 years, to show to Putin that Belarus should not be swallowed by Russia, because you can swallow something if it's part of something different. You can swallow it if it doesn't distinguish from the other culture. And from 2022, he feels himself so isolated that he just gave up. And the key national drama theater is currently has no text. The play composed by Belarusians, and they're making it in the key drama national theater. It's called National Drama Theater, and they put Russian texts on stage. And I love Russian texts. I admire Russian playwrights, and some of them are really good. But the problem that they are doing it because they don't have enough actors in the troupe, in the crew, who could read and perform Belarusian language. So it's a madness. It's national drama theater. It's a national drama theater because these actors are hired in provincial small Russian theaters, and they are ready to collaborate. And the bright ones, the true ones, they either work as pizza delivery boys in Warsaw, or as supermarket cart drivers in Vilnius. And it is really like that. You recognize somebody who used to be a star, who used to be on all posters around the city, who is driving a taxi because he decided he chosen to be out of it. And of course you have posing this question to yourself all the time. Should I propose something to National Drama Theatre just to be alive or not? And you know, when you are writing texts, and this is the meaning of your life, and you are not having these texts published somehow, because the reading itself is also a publication. That's why if I try to read you something, for this fragment, it's a publication, and I don't believe it will be published soon. It maybe will be published, will never be published, right? And for this fragment, it will be the only brief, of air, only portion of air it will take. So yeah, this is more or less the situation we have. I'm very much aware that my writings, my book of Mova, for example, my book of Night, which were very, very famous. I mean, I had autograph sessions, the book signing sessions lasting for 6 hours. You can imagine the crowd to sign a book for 6 hours, and at the moment, as I realize now, it was just to protect the independence of Belarus politically. Of course, I'm for cultural independence of Belarus, but the number of writers or musicians who are ready to participate in it right now, after 2020 or after 2022, is very small. This is it. Sorry for a long reply. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, there's something, well, I understand this is a big question, and probably if it is too big, you do not have to answer it right now. So I've been thinking about, this issue for a long time. So you enumerated outstanding cultural phenomena like Aginsky, like Chagall, Martinovich, all those. And you said modern Belarus. Of course, it is this all happened on the territory of modern Belarus, but well, historically that was either Poland or this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And Chagall, he never in his dreams or whatever thought of himself as Belarusian. He was Jewish from the Russian Empire. That probably was his identity.
Mm-hmm.
So this activity of this does not only happen in Belarus, it happens in Ukraine, in other places. This activity of designating all those diverse phenomena as our national culture. Well, what's your take on this?
Mm-hmm. Well, good question. But I think it's better to be inclusive than to be exclusive. It's better to say he's ours than to ruin somebody's statue, even if we are very, very in big pain. In big pain. I realize the level of pain some people may be right now in the region, but I think that some great books are not responsible. If you want to ruin somebody's statue, go to Dostoevsky, for example, to somebody who is really responsible, to Pushkin, but never ruin it, please, because it's a work of art and it's symbolize some kind of painful thoughts this person was through. So to answer your question, I have to remind the Nobel Prize lecture of Thomas Eliot. It was dedicated to the correlation between the tradition and individual talent. And Thomas Eliot was one of the pioneers in many senses, but still his Nobel Prize lecture was on tradition. So to reinvent or restart the culture, the literature of some country, you have to really invent a tradition. If there is no tradition at all, whatever you would do will not stay, because it simply doesn't work like that. It will be probably a part of some other country's tradition, but not of a tradition existing in your country. And literally, you can try to be inventive and non-traditional in cinema, but literature is actually rooted in tradition. I can't write a single line without imagining some tradition I am applying to. And this tradition, of course, includes Sutin, Dostoevsky, Sutin, Chagall. I'm sorry, Sutin, Chagall, and Zhukovsky, and Oginsky, of course. Yeah, who how do you think he is Belarusian? He is Polish. Of course, Chagall is Jewish. Of course, Sutin is Russian Jewish. Of course, you know what they put about Sutin in Metropolitan Museum on this Harlem Renaissance exhibition? They said that he's Lithuanian-born Jewish. And I mean, I don't understand it, because he was born on a territory of contemporary Belarus, which is far away from Lithuania, which has never been part even of Great Duchy of Lithuania. So I realized that.
So they've taken what is ours, right? Okay.
Yes. So I believe that somebody's work is to think some artists or writers as if they were Belarusians, because it is the book is, or poem is not written by the poet. It's written by its readers. If some talented reader says that, you know, Brodsky is a Ukrainian poet, and he proves it effectively, even given what Brodsky wrote about Ukraine, that would be interesting, because it is a reader who writes somebody's legacy, writing's legacy, and not the writer or poet or prose writer. So this is my attitude to it. We should be very, very inclusive, especially in a situation of this continuous erasure, when you do something and it swipes by the waves every 30 years. Yeah.
Can I? Thank you very much, Victor, for both the presentation and anticipate your reading. I am puzzled very much by two statements, two issues, by your statement that your talk or your topic is boring, and the number of mentionings of Dostoevsky, even kind of coming from your subconsciousness. And I am a scholar of Ukraine. I work primarily on Ukraine, and I simply cannot imagine a Ukrainian, contemporary Ukrainian author who would state that their culture is boring. I believe and I know that this is not what you, it's not your take, it's not what you think about your own culture and your own production, scholarly writing, but this is something that you assume we think about your country. So, and my question is, I guess, for invitation to reflect is on this essential difference between the public diplomacy of Belarusian major cultural figures, whom I wanted to hear more about from your talk. Maybe you will expand later. And the current Ukrainian publicity and, you know, the enormous number of talks, poetry readings, tours by public figures and politicians from Ukraine. And this, you know, you gave the introduction about the Belarusian culture, the dichotomy between East and West. So what's your input on this significant difference? Why the West, why we are supposed to be bored? Why don't we hear more? And where are these public figures from Belarus that are supposed to make this feel, this topic, this, you know, to make it flaming and not boring?
Well, you know, it's a matter of taste and a matter of sense of humor, because of course, I mean, of course I'm joking, but nobody laughs. That means that you accept it, and this is interesting. This is first. The second thing is that, you know, I measure myself with my own expectation of somebody who is presenting himself, his culture, and his literature for the first and probably the last time for years. And I think that I would be more sympathetic to somebody who would be very critical than to somebody who would start jumping and singing a song about we being number one in the world. Because obviously we are not number one in the world. The reasons I can provide you, my vision of these reasons, if you are interested. But I think that you are rather interested in trying to understand what is the mindset that somebody who dedicated his life to culture production, let's say in these neo-Marxist terms, to culture production in such a wasted situation, what this person will present as his mindset. So of course I start with self-humor, but it's a really bitter thing, because you have to just say something for yourself. Okay, I'm boring, but I'm doing my best, running on the same place. I run from the morning to evening, right, with no visible changes in my landscape. So I know Sergei Zhadan very well. We've been sharing a table for a couple of times, and I feel this difference of our self-presentation. But even Svetlana Alexievich, right now, who is a Nobel Prize winner, would not behave her as a winner. Because, if you have a war going on, and if you have a constant flow of repressions going on, you have this feeling of personal responsibility, yours responsibility. You should have done something. And the choice that we have in Belarus right now is either you get very, very loud after immigration, you immigrate, you start living in United States, for example, or in Europe, and starts to be very loud. You give a lot of interviews, but your words, they don't have power, because whatever you say is not punishable. You are just like, somebody who is out of a prison, or you stay inside the prison, and every word you take is a result of very dense inner work. Every time you open your mouth, you decide to what extent you will be honest. To what extent in your potential new book, you will tell the truth. Staying inside. And it is important for you to stay inside, because once you immigrated, you are simply not important anymore. So this is it. You have public talks. You used to be very recognizable public figure. Now it's like once a year you come to Germany and you try or to France or to the United States, and you try to find a new tone in between of this catastrophe. And this tone is obviously not a tone of Sergei Zhadan, who is a star and who is a very important figure, because he has a beauty of gained attention and huge talent. So this is it. We're different, because I don't have an attention at all, and none of us have. None of us have. Can you remember Svetlana Alexievich interview last 6 months? And her job is to give interviews or write books. She does neither of that. I have, I can name easily top 5 writers: Alger Bakharevich, Sasha Filipenko. I can't remember them being successful or behaving themselves successfully. If you still have some interest in Belarusian literature after what I told you. Well, I was good. But, but I think, you know, the writer has to present himself in his texts, and he has to be punished mostly for his texts and not for the interviews, as we have right now in the region, when somebody is punished for the quality of statements he provided in the interviews, and texts are put aside. Nobody interested in what is written. But this is the nature of our job, to express, to find words, to express ourselves in text. So thank you for this. Do we have any other? Do you have any other comments? Would you like to reply something to comment on this?
No, thank you. I think I have enough material to build an entire lecture in my upcoming course of the differences between the Belarusian and the Ukrainian. But it's very interesting, and it's I appreciate giving me more.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Victor. My name is John Branch. I'm the Associate Director here at Careers and happen to be a professor at the business school in my other job. I wanted to have your thoughts on a slightly different take, which is this notion of cultural ownership, if you will, that these cultural products, different societies make claim to them. And then maybe how this ownership is almost a form of cultural colonialism leading to monetization. Where this really struck me, I'll tell you, the first time I traveled to Poland in 1992, and every single village in Poland seems to lay claim to Chopin being here, or went to the toilet there, or slept in that bed, almost as a way to say Chopin is ours and therefore we can monetize him. And in a former life, I was an electrical engineer, and do you know how many countries lay claim to Nikola Tesla? Right? My home country of Canada says he was Canadian, right? Americans say he did all of his research here, therefore he is American, and he was born in Serbia, but he was Croatian, right? So is this cultural erasure you're talking about, is it a form of cultural colonialism, and does it have anything to do with how we can lay claim to the property and therefore monetize it? Including, by the way, Martinovich, who's one of my favorites, but Polish roots, born in Kiev, but if you talk to anybody, he's Russian.
Ukraine.
Talk to many people, he's Russian.
Malevich was especially bad in case with Vitebsk Art School, because he was a star from Moscow, and he was the head of the school who created the school.
Speak louder.
Huh?
Speak louder.
Oh yeah, the head of the school, the People Art School, Chagall, received the salary 30 times lesser than the salary of Malevich, only because he was a star. He was a lecturer from Moscow. Malevich was the head of the school, but since the chief accountant of People's Art School was a pupil of Malevich, she was really admiring him. So Malevich created a sect in our case, and I'm happy for him. As to the, you actually posed two questions. The first question is about the relations with the legacy of these artists, and in here we have very strange situation, because Chagall was legalized in Moscow in 1985. So 1985 they had a huge exhibition of Chagall in Moscow. And in Vitebsk it wasn't legalized at all until 2000, because there were a bunch of anti-Semites in culture production, and they were very unhappy with Chagall. And one of the reasons why I failed to defend my dissertation on Chagall in the zeros in 1999 to the 2000 was that he is a Jew. Didn't you know that he is a Jew? You want to defend a thesis on the Jew who immigrated from USSR? No. So madness. And the reason why we didn't have, this topic of Chagall legacy. Chagall, in his testament, in his final, is it a testament? The thing that you write when you are dying?
Will.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, in his will, he said that if Belarus has enough space to host my unsold works, I want them to be sent to Belarus. And since Belarus at the moment and in the middle of 80s were communist and anti-Semitic, they said, no, we will not host Marc Chagall's works, not at all. Not a single painting can be monitored in Belarus. So the relations with our Chagall legacy is something of very weird stories. And as to the first question was about, can you please remind it?
Ownership of the property, monetization.
Ownership of a property, yeah. When I would love to see one day Belarus claiming its property and arguing that we should probably ask, for example, Haïm Soutine, one of the artists of L'École de Paris, with skyrocketing prices on auctions on these events where people do buy the pictures. He wasn't legally married, and he didn't have children, and because of this, he doesn't have the number of individuals who can claim for his legacy. He doesn't have the institution as it was with Chagall. He had this institute. He has actually two organizations which fight for his property, for his legacy, for his pictures. In case with Soutine, if some tricky guy would go to Smilovici and fake out the documents that somebody in Smilovici is a far relative of Soutine, the person with Belarusian passport could actually just blow up the whole market, because there is nobody can say that we want you to give us 30% of this picture because it was sold by a person who has no rights for this picture. He was a Jew, and he was a Jew. Soutine was a Jew who is buried in Paris under the cross because he died when Paris was occupied by Nazis, and he was buried under the cross to hide the fact that we actually, and he had the different name, the fake name, and this fake name kept him from accessing his bank accounts in 1940s. So yeah, this is a picture of what is happening with our attitude with legacy, institutional on the governmental level, and our government has more interest in selling Putin's oil and gas than in paying any interest to these delicate questions, which could actually give us a lot of world interest, because we are the home of Chagall and Soutine and all others, and many others. Yeah.
May I follow up?
Yep.
So thank you very much for the Marc Chagall. I lived in France. I assumed he was French. I had no idea. I had no idea he was Belarusian. There's an interesting parallel also with Marcus Rothkowitz, Mark Rothko, whom of course America claims as his own, but actually Jewish Latvian, born in Daugavpils. And what's interesting is that Latvia has absolutely made claim to Rothko, and now there's a massive Rothko museum in Daugavpils, which up until 10 years ago, Daugavpils and Latvia made zero claim to Rothko. People who are into Rothko, I absolutely love Rothko, make pilgrimages to Daugavpils in eastern Latvia to see this museum. So interesting that two countries, Latvia and Belarus, right beside each other, one is, again, making claim that this is our cultural property and consequently monetizing it, whereas another country is saying no.
Yeah. Interesting fact. Yeah.
If I may.
Yep.
It's not a question.
Mhm.
I just would like to offer a different perspective on the contemporary state of Belarusian culture a little bit. I'm a conference interpreter, Russian conference interpreter. Have been working in the international realm for more than 2 decades, and on Belarusian issues since 2013. And yes, I've observed this absolutely tragic decimation of Belarusian civil society inside of the country. But what I'm seeing now are emerging, vibrant, beautiful, proactive diasporas in Europe, in the United States. 2020 pretty much evoke the realization, the awareness of Belarusian national identity in many of your compatriots. And not only the diasporas are diverse, and I understand that I have a perception bias looking at it from my own industry, but here is a little fact. Right now, I'm actively learning Belarusian language as a conference interpreter because I see the growing demand, rapidly growing demand for Belarusian language. And actually the question that I am kind of exploring right now, I see that this shift, this almost tectonic cultural shift from predominantly Russian to predominantly Belarusian is going so fast that many Belarusians are not keeping up.
Yep.
And to me, the interesting question is how to facilitate this change, not just to turn off the spigot of one language, which is de facto, for many reasons, the mother tongue of many Belarusian. I mean Belarusians, I mean Russian. And how to facilitate this transition to predominantly Belarusian without leaving people behind. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
And I'm looking right now at the strategy for national renaissance, strategy for national revival that has been developed by Tikhanovskaya's staff. And I see the multiple conferences of Belarusian diasporas, of Belarusian business communities. And again, you know, to me the question in a way is where asserting healthy national identity ends and toxic nationalism starts. Like Bobby, где заканчивается полиция, где начинается пение.
The big share of nationalism is needed to enforce the state, which has a kind of independency that was given and not taken. We didn't fight for our independence, and this is bad because it can be easily lost when you didn't take it. Yeah, and that's why I believe interest to history and to the language is very important. Because I mean, even though we are living in the 21st century, and 21st century tends to promise us that in a while everybody will speak only English, despite this fact, I'm afraid Belarusian is very important. Very important. It's important. But as I mentioned, I'm a kind of individual who doesn't believe in the future of Belarusian literature abroad, unfortunately, because all our readers are inside of the country. We have the top, really top. Alger Bakharevich had published Kapitan Letuchaya Ryba 2 months ago. 80 books sold. It would be 8,000 in Belarus. That's why I'm not active in publishing anything in Belarusian language abroad. Because I know my perspective, I'm realistic, and I'm kind of pessimistic, you know, I'm not telling that I'm a hero. You cannot be a hero outside of your country if you are writing for your country. There are like 400,000 people who left Belarus past 4 years. It's 500,000 broadly, but these people can hardly fill the rooms in literary events of Vilnius and Warsaw. Unfortunately, the more effective you are in immigration depends on your ability to camouflage, you know, to become fluent in local culture. The role of our national literature is reduced to the role of, you know, the songs that you sing to your children abroad. This is not equal to the literature. Literature is most powerful. I guess it was fear caused by visions of hell that made Botticelli join Savonarola and kill his talent.